So as you may know, I've been running LF for quite a while, and occasionally I like to try out different file managers. And today I'm going to try out what I like to describe as the measuring stick of file managers. So we're going to be looking at NNN today. So this is the program that a lot of terminal file managers seem to compare themselves to, and a lot of people really hype up this program, so let's see if it actually lives up to the hype. So if you're new to the channel, you know what to do, and let's jump right into it. So if we're just considering the number of features that are implemented when you actually install NNN, I would say that LF is far smaller, but I think that LF actually is a much bigger program in general. So I think it's just because it's a dual window terminal file manager, so it inherently needs to have extra code to support that. I'm not sure how big the binary is for LF. I think it actually is bigger than NNN, but generally that's not too important. So NNN will hook into a lot of the default utilities you already have installed in your computer. So you're probably going to want to have archiving in your terminal file manager. It has support for archiving through those general archive utilities you use. If you've come from a dual pane file manager like I have, it doesn't have support for the same sort of previews, but you can technically do previews. They're more like file opens than previews. You can open something up in your terminal in a read-only mode, and that's sort of like a preview. It's not the same thing, but it kind of is. So I'm not going to go into every single thing this can do, but like if we look in here, the dependencies in here, we have stuff for core utils, we have tar and all that for archiving, archive mount, fuser mount, so it can actually mount devices. There's SSHFS, rclone. We've got integration for trash CLI, which is something that I didn't think that I really cared about until I installed trash CLI and realized that I stopped deleting files that I occasionally would need. So that's very important, and also it'll hook into things like your standard environment variables. So all of this stuff is very simple. It doesn't try to do anything out of the box. What NNN intends to be is it describes itself basically as the the missing terminal file manager of X. So it's trying to do everything in the most standard way possible, and by doing so, they've created a very, very quick program. It also doesn't hurt that it's written in C, so that also typically helps with speed, but you can write slow C programs. So the first thing you're going to want to do is actually get NNN installed. Now this is really simple. On pretty much every distro, it's going to be in your standard repos. So if you're on Arch, sudo pacman-s NNN. I've already got it installed, so I'm not going to bother with that. And let's just open it up. And I'll open up a second one, just because I'm not 100% on the key bindings all the time, so I'll just keep that open so I don't start questioning those. So the first thing you're going to notice is that it has Vim Binding, so I'll actually open up screen key as well, so we can just see those. So you can go up and down with Vim keys, you can go into something with L, you can go out of it with H. If you go into a file, it's actually going to open it up with whatever XDG open has set to open it. Now, XDG open can be a problem, especially when you're working with command line apps. If you live entirely in a command line environment, it's going to be fine. But if you also use GUI programs, it's going to be a problem. So the way that I've actually got my text files to open up, I don't know why Python files are opening up in my browser. They shouldn't be doing that. But for general text files, if I open up, say, my bash RC or something like that, it's going to open up another terminal and then open my editor, whereas I want my editor to just open up in this terminal window. The reason I have it set up like that is just so if I'm in a GUI file manager, I can still open up my editor. So what you're going to want to do is actually press E on this file, and that'll actually open it up in your, whatever you've got set as your default editor within your environment variables. So you'll notice very quickly that NNN actually relies very, very heavily on environment variables. So if we just quit out of that, that'll bring us back into NNN. Okay, so if we just look at the bindings, there's not too much in here, but there's a couple of things that might be fairly interesting looking. So for example, this context up here. So what a context is a tab. I don't know why they're called context. They're called context though. So if we press 2, that'll take us to a second tab. Let's just give a better example of that. So we're in the downloads folder in tab 2 or context 2, and we go back to context 1, and now we're in the home folder. So we can jump back and forth between those. You can then do something like select these files, and one thing you'll notice is you don't actually have a key to copy. So with NNN, you don't actually have a copy buffer, unlike with LF and Ranger and a lot of programs like that. So that you do a selection and then you do a paste. Whereas with Ranger, you do a selection, a copy, and then a paste. So it removes the step. I think this is actually a really nice way to set it up, and it's one of the things that really tempts me to start using NNN. So we've selected those. Let's go over to the downloads folder. Then we can press P, or we could press V would let us move it. We're not going to move them, we're going to paste them. So we press P, and if we look in here now, we've got this get pip.py and highlight.css. So there was one other way you could do copy and moves as well, and that was with W. So let's just delete these files, so we can select those, and we can press X, and then it gives us the option of deleting the current or the selected. So if we do selected, that'll delete both of those files. If we do the current, then that'll only do the one that we're actually highlighting. So we'll press S, and that will then delete those two. So let's highlight these files again, come back to context 2, and press W this time. So now we have the option of doing a copy or a move. So let's just do copy. So doing it through this method actually gives us the ability to rename the file. So we can call this getpip2 and highlight and a bunch of jumbled characters. Okay, we save that, and now if we look in here, we've got getpip2 and highlight with a bunch of jumbled characters. So if you want to do a copy and a rename at the same time, you do it through W, whereas if you just want to do a copy or you just want to do a move, you can use P or V for whichever one you need to actually use. So if you press Q, you can actually close one of the contexts. So let's just close context 2 in this case, and that brings us back into our home directory. I was playing with some stuff off camera, that's why it was not actually in home. Anyway, so what we should be able to do is also quit with Control-Shift-Q as well, but for some reason that doesn't seem to be working. I'm not really sure why, and I know that's definitely Control-Shift-Q because Control-Shift-W actually works as expected. So I'm not sure what that is. That might be an ST problem, I'm not sure. It's very possible it's an ST problem though. So we can see that we can jump around like this. You can also do things like press the apostrophe to jump down to the first file. You can jump up to the top with G, you can jump down to the bottom with capital G, but most of this stuff isn't too important because the way that NNN is intended to be used isn't through moving around with Vim keys, it's through moving around with searches. So it's generally going to be quicker to search for stuff instead of actually moving to it. So if we press slash, that will bring us into search mode, so similar to how Vim works. And let's say we start typing in pictures. So pictures is here, we can press enter, which now in here, we can start typing in emotes. Now we're in here, and now we can say, type in for this one, and open that up. And then that'll actually bring that open in my image opening program. So this is the way that NNN is intended to be used. It's intended to be used to actually search and jump to places. So because of that, there's actually another mode you can work with called nav as you type, and it's actually a really cool mode, and I think this is another one of those things where I kind of want to actually use it just because it's just really cool. So if we press Control-Shift-N, this will bring us into nav as you type mode. So before, when we wanted to jump into something, we had to press enter. So this mode will actually remove that. So if we start typing in pictures, so now we're in here, I didn't have to press anything. So then we can go emote, and now we're in here. And now we go in here, and I don't think it will automatically open files for you. You can't really go backwards from what I've seen, so you actually have to leave nav as you type mode. So you can go back like this, but I don't think you can actually start backspacing to go into the previous directories. I think you can go one level back up, but I don't think it actually maintains everything that you type. That would be really nice if it did. And if I happen to miss that, then let me know in the comment section down below, but I don't think that's a thing you can do. It would be really nice if it was there though. So I didn't show you how to actually show hidden files before. That's probably kind of important if you're using a file manager like this. So by default, hidden files aren't shown. So if we press the most sensible key I've ever seen to show hidden files, we press dot. So to show the dot files, you press dot. I know, it makes perfect sense. Other programs will use like H and other things like that. I think Ranger uses Z, or maybe that's LF. I think LF might use Z by default. But dot. Dot to show the dot files. That makes the most possible sense I have ever seen. So there's a couple of the movement stuff in here, but I don't think most of this is too important. Like you can do things such as jump directly to the home directory. You can move to the top and bottom. I think I showed you that one. You can close stuff. This isn't too important in here. You can obviously do scroll up and scroll down as well. So page up, page down does what page up and page down do. Now, stuff that's interesting isn't any of this in here, so you can't actually see all of it because my webcam was in the way. There we go. So you can do unmounts, you can do batch renames. There is batch renaming in this, so if you do really like that from something like VIFM or Ranger, it is available here. You can make symlinks, you can make archives, you can unarchive stuff, you can select stuff, you can deselect stuff. I'm not going to bother showing that stuff, that's not too important. What I wanted to show is the very interesting way that it actually handles doing configuration. So NNN doesn't use a config file. Now you might say, but is it like the suckless utilities then? Do I have to modify the source code? And no, you don't, because that's also really dumb. What you have to do with this, okay, it's fast, but it's kind of dumb. What you have to do with this is actually modify environment variables. So let's just have a look at the man page for NNN. So we've got NNN opener, NNN BMS, NNN plug, and I think that's, oh, there's a couple more. NNN colors, NNN SSHFS, NNN rclone, and NNN trash. So what you do with these is you can actually set these within wherever you set your environment variables within your shell, and this is how you configure NNN. So instead of relying on a config file, or instead of relying on modifying the source code, it's just going to read in environment variables, and I think this is a really cool way to handle it. And then the nice thing is all of this is actually really, really well documented. So for the opener, the way you do this is export NNN_opener and then whatever opener program you want to use. Obviously, you could write your own, but there's also a plugin for that. So feel free to use that one, or feel free to use whatever you feel like using. You could use scope.char if you really wanted to. I think it's scope.char. Is that the one? No, scope.char is for previews. No? Someone let me know. I can't remember what range you use the scope.char for. I think it's either going to be previews or file opening. But anyway, you can write a script to do file opening. You could use a pre-made one. You could just rely on XDG open, whatever you feel like using. So the one that I really care about, and this is where NNN really bothers me, just that small amount. Just the small amount that I don't want to use it. It's with bookmarking. So with bookmarks, you can only bookmark 10 keys, which I can't do. That's the thing that's going to stop me from using NNN. So I like to bookmark pretty much my entire file system. So if you look at my LF configs, I have pretty much everywhere I care about bookmarked. Now with this, I wouldn't be able to, and that bothers me a little bit, and it's part of the reason why I don't want to use this. But the way you do it is actually very, very simple. They're just colon and semicolon separated strings. So if you want to bind a key to D, you go D, colon, the directory you want to actually jump to, and then semicolon for the next one after it. So semicolon separates each of the different bindings, colon separates the key and the directory. So I think the easiest way to show you how this works is to actually show you some environment variables. So let's have a look at my ZSH-emp file. So obviously if you're on bash, you're going to use your bash RC. I'm on ZSH though. So let's just have a look at this. So ZSH-emp, and here we go. So I've modified a few of the variables. I haven't modified all of them because I don't really care about most of them. So we've got BMS, trash, and plug. So I'll show you plug in a few moments, but the way plugins work are also really, really simple, and it'll make perfect sense if you've ever done anything on your computer, really. So for BMS, this is how you set your bookmarks. So I've got one in here for videos. So let's just add another one. Let's add one for, say, I don't know, directly jumping into my anime folder. That works. So you have to separate it with a colon and then put in the path to the actual folder. So videos/anime. Okay. So something to keep in mind, because they are environment variables, you do have to source your environment file again before you can actually use them. So to do that, the easiest way is to restart your terminal. I'm not going to do it like that though. I'm going to show you the other way to do it. So if you've never really had to do this before, basically if you write source, this is now directly in my way, source, and then the name of the file you actually want to source. So if you're on bash, you want to source your bash RC. If you're on ZSH, then you're going to source your ZSH-emp file. So you just write that and it'll work perfectly fine, assuming the file actually exists. Then we bring up NNN again, and as we can see in here, if we were to press, say, V, or we press A, this isn't going to work. So the way bookmarks work is you have to have a leader key first, because otherwise you're going to start clashing with the keys that are already bound to stuff. And the leader key for bookmarks is B. So we press B, and we can see in here that we've got two bookmark keys, so V and A. It doesn't tell us what they're bound to. That's one of the things I'm not a big fan of. With LF, it gives you a list of what everything's bound to. Same with Ranger, and same with a lot of file managers. This kind of assumes that you always know what keys are bound to what path. But assuming you do, then you can actually go directly to where you want to go. So let's just press A, and that'll jump into the anime folder. Okay, so that works exactly as we'd expect. So trash 1, basically what that does is says, instead of just automatically deleting files when I press delete, it will use the trash directory instead, or use the trash CLI protocol instead. Let's bring up the man page and just have a look at that. So NNN_trash. I spelled that wrong. NNN underscore trash. Has to be a capital. Okay. So this will use trash instead of delete. Now, obviously, you have to have trash CLI installed, otherwise it's not going to work. But assuming you do, then it'll use a trash bin instead. So I can't remember what the path for that is, but let's just have a look at my GUI file manager. So it's your home directory.local/share/trash/files. So that'll bring you to where all of your trash files are stored. So obviously, you can use whatever method you want to restore them or to delete them from this point. You can even bind something within NNN to do it automatically. So on that note, this is where we get to plugins. So if you were to write a plugin to work more with Trash CLI, you could do it through that. Now, working with plugins is very, very simple. So let's just go back over to the GitHub page, and this is actually the GitHub page for the NNN plugins. So this is all of the official plugins that are listed on the GitHub page. So there's plenty of stuff in here, like you've got drag and drop, you've got, which is actually really cool. I'm going to do a separate video on the program used for drag and drop. It's really cool. But there's a bunch of stuff in here. You can do things like update plugins, and that requires curl, and you can do a bunch of other stuff in here like image thumbnails. That's what this one up here is. Obviously, your terminal will have to support that, but if it does, then you can do things like that. And there's a bunch of really cool stuff in here, but the way that this works is really, really simple. So it works with an environment variable again. So it's bound the exact same way. So you can bind a key to a plugin. So in this case, I've got O bound to fuzzy open. Now I don't have fuzzy open installed, but this is one of the default plugins. So to get the default plugins installed, what you can do is just use this very, very simple script right here. So they've been kind enough just to give you a hand to download every single one of the plugins. Curl, and then we're going to download everything from this Git directory, and then we're going to pipe that into SHA, and basically what that's going to do is just download all of the files. So let's just run that and see what it's going to do. Chuck that in here. Okay. That'll take just a second to finish. Now, we look in here, this will actually put it all into our plugins directory. So where is the plugins directory? So this is also in a place that makes perfect sense. So if we go into our config folder, and then we go down to NNN, and then we go down to plugins. And now we have all the plugins installed that were basically default plugins. So you can have a look through all of these and basically see how they work, but they're all just POSIX compliant shell scripts. So if you're using fish, you're going to have a problem. Stop using fish, but if you're using fish, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to probably write some compatibility layer or rewrite the scripts yourself. If you're on fish though, you know you have those problems, so you probably know how to deal with them. So let's say, look at this drag and drop one, for example. So actually that's a really long script. Let's have a shorter one. This one, this dups one. So this will list non-empty duplicate files in the current directory. Okay, so basically, as we can see, there is literally nothing special about this. It is just a shell script, which is really cool. So if you want to write your own scripts for this, you can use shell script, you can use Perl, you can use Python. The standard way to do it is with POSIX compliant shell script though, so I would recommend sticking with that. If you want to use something else though, you're entirely free to do that. All you have to do is just write a basic script. There's no special syntax you have to use, nothing special like that. Like, look at this one. All it's doing is taking in an argument, so it's not even using special argument names. There might be special argument names. Look through some of the scripts. I haven't looked much into scripting it, but this one, look. It's just taking in the first value that comes into the script. So I'm going to assume that's probably the path or something like that. And because of that, that makes it really, really simple to actually script this program. So you saw before that we had fuzzy open bound to O. So how do we actually run that? Because obviously, the same with bookmarks, if we were to just press O, that would actually overwrite some sort of other key. So it has to have another leader key. And for plugins, that leader key is semicolon. So if we press semicolon, that'll bring up all the plugin keys. So if we press O now, this will then bring up Fuzzy Finder basically, and then we can open any of these. So GTK, RC2, we can open that, and then that just opens that up in our editor. So basically, it's just a way to use Fuzzy Finder to open files. So that's actually really cool, and all the plugins work in a very similar way. So you can just bind them to a key, and then that'll run the plugin. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. There's not too much of interest left in here. Most of the stuff you can go check out for yourself. Like, I'm not going to go through any of the batch rename stuff. I mentioned that before, but you can open up a shell prompt from here. You can launch an app. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with NNN. Now, I think it's a really, really cool program, but there's a couple of things I'm not a big fan of that are probably going to stop me from using it. So having the tabs there is really cool. Having the nav as you type is really cool. The plugin setup is really cool. There's a lot of stuff I really like about NNN, and it is lightning fast. And I just can't use it because I have these tiny problems that LF addresses that I think are far more important to me. Like, for example, not having the limit on the number of bookmark keys you can have. That's a really big one for me. Honestly, most of the stuff in NNN I can kind of ignore because I have the unlimited number of bookmark keys in LF. The other thing I like about LF, this is more of a me thing. I do kind of like to script all the stuff myself. Obviously, if you want a good terminal file manager right now, NNN it's probably the best one I've seen. Now, it doesn't have previews, it's not a dual pane, but it's a really good program. And if anyone says to me, what terminal file manager should I use, I'm probably gonna suggest NNN, at least at this stage. I haven't tried out things like Midnight Commander, and there's another one I want to try out, VIFM. I've tried out VIFM a little bit. I'm not a big fan of it, but I can see why people like it. So I'll get to those videos at some point, but for now, I really like NNN. I'm not going to daily drive it though. I'm going to stick with LF just because of the bookmark keys. Everything else I love about NNN, but it's just the bookmark keys that really bother me. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to talk about in this video. So if you like this video, remember to smash that like button and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. If you want to see more videos like this, remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below because it'll really help the channel out. I'm now aiming for 10,000 subs and any help would be really appreciated. Up on that corner, I've got the playlist of this videos in, so go check that out if you want to see other videos like this. Down below, I've got all of my social links, so my Discord and my Telegram, so go check that out if you want to chat with me or you want to get video updates. I've also got my support links down below, so my Patreon and various other donate links, so feel free to use any of those if you want to donate to the channel, but obviously you don't have to if you don't want to, but any help will be really appreciated. And lastly, I've got my alternate video platform, so my BitTube and my library, so if you want to see my videos on a platform that isn't YouTube, then go check those out. So I think that's pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.